Well, we really don't need to introduce Brian because he's already introduced himself, but nevertheless, for the two of you who don't know who Brian is, he will make himself abundantly known as he comes up and speaks this morning. But Brian is the chair of the Australian Children's Music Foundation, but I'm pretty sure you're not speaking about that this morning. He's the Chief Executive Officer and Chair of National Skills Week, and he's also a former Director of World Skills Australia. Now, I'm just curious, I've asked this before, has anyone ever attended a World Skills occasion? Could you put your hand up? Okay, there's a lot of people without their hands up. If you haven't, and it's in Sydney, or I think it's in Melbourne this year, if I'm correct, take the opportunity. It's truly incredible, and Brian's been one of the spearheads for that for many, many years. Not currently, though. So as I said, Brian is the Chair and Executive Officer of National Skills Week. Now, if you haven't heard of National Skills Week, then you have some homework to do as well, and I'm sure after Brian speaks today, you'll be fully aware of what National Skills Week does. Brian has experience from all around the world in many roles in media and education at the highest levels. He now brings this skill and knowledge to championing the positive messages of vocational learning. He does this by highlighting the talents, the skills, the career pathways, and the value of apprentices and trainees across Australia. It's wonderful to have Brian with us again today, so please join me in welcoming Brian Wexham.
Thank you. And before I started, I went up to Claire and I said, look, can you just make sure that your presentation is desperately dull to give me a chance because I'm following you? And what I should have said, can you make it desperately dull, not very interesting? But I have to say, Claire, I learned so much. It was phenomenal. Thank you so much. I'm not going to talk about those intellectual aspects that you did. I'm going to concentrate on what I will call the personal aspects, because when I was asked to speak, I thought, well, okay, I know it's going to be a mixed audience with different roles, and what is it that we can do, and what are the challenges that we have faced? And one of the challenges that continually comes up is that people, and I say in a general way, don't really understand VET. So when you're talking to parents, they don't really understand it. And not only not understand it, but they don't understand the diversity of it and the opportunities. So I'm going to kick off today with what we have been taking around. It's the first 3 minutes of a thing called the Skills and Thrill Show. Now, if any of you have ever seen the Skills and Thrill Show, terrific. If you haven't, this is something that started about 10, 12 years ago. I went to see John Barilaro, who was then the minister responsible for skills and training. And I went into John's office and I said, John, I'll tell you what I want to do. I want to excite career advisors. And he said, how are you going to do that? I said, I want to put on a show. And he said, what sort of show? And I said, well, we're going to have music, we're going to have a rock and roll band, we're going to have film, we're going to have animation, I'm going to have dancers, we're going to have theatre, and it's going to be absolutely brilliant to demonstrate the diversity of vocational education. And he looked at me and said, okay. And I thought, yes, I can do it. He said, yeah. So we went and got NIDA, and we put on a show. And I can't remember how many, but it was between 350 and 450 career advisors all over New South Wales came along to it. And it was called the Magical Mystery Tour of Skills. And since then, we've actually been able to, he asked if we could then do it in metro areas to students and then to parents, and then can we take it out to regional areas? And I said, well, I can't take a rock and roll band at Dubbo, but what I can do is maybe convert it to film and show it at the cinema, which is what we did. So the last Skills and Thrill show we did was only last week. We did it at the theatre in Wollongong University, and we had something like 400 students turn up for it from the various high schools around Illawarra. So this is the first 3 minutes. So I'll show you this. Oh, I've got to do this, haven't I? All right.
Plato said, I would teach children music, physics, and philosophy, but most importantly music, for in the patterns of music and all the arts are the keys of learning. Research has proven the many benefits of a music education. The very best engineers and technical designers in the Silicon Valley industry are almost without exception practicing musicians.
Are you born with destiny? Or does it just come knocking at your door?
He's a young singer from Memphis, Tennessee. Give him a warm hayride welcome, Mr. Elvis Presley.
Oh, my love, my darling, I've hungered for your touch.
Reverend once told me, when things are too dangerous to say, sing.
Time goes by
I'm on before the sun,
so slow,
and nobody's gonna remember me.
can do so much.
I need to get back to who I really am.
Still more.
And who are you, Oz?
I just gotta be making the most of this thing while I can. This can all be over in a flash.
The greatest show on earth.
Elvis has left the building.
When no one else can understand me, when everything I do is wrong, you give me hope and consolation. You give me strength to carry on, and you're always there to lend a hand in everything I do. As the wonder of you. And when you smile, the world is brighter.
So that's what we start with. And the purpose of that is to actually get some inspiration and some energy, and to get students, and indeed we've done this for parents too, to understand the diversity and the opportunity. And just building on some of the points that Claire was making, technology, that was all produced on the Gold Coast. Now, if you just think about all the scenes, the music, the makeup, the costumes, and by the way, the costumes, as you know, Catherine Martin was the costume designer, married to Baz. She went to TAFE. She did costume design at New South Wales TAFE, and then she went on to NIDA. She's won 4 Oscars. Now, the point that I'm making on all of this is that we have to actually, from the skills point of view, is that we actually have to use our skills to convey the message about vocational education. And in order to do that, what I want to try and do today is to give you some of the thoughts behind that, because it is a challenge. It is a challenge. And everybody in this room, we all do make a difference, and it's a very important point. I mean, I've been working on the Children's Music Foundation, and I know that we make a difference to people's lives, and it's the same with vocational education. So, when I say promote awareness, I mean promote awareness about VET. And it's also, I guess, at the same time, overcoming some of those myths that are created about VET. I mean, for example, one of the things that we show is Tchaikovsky. Now, you're probably thinking, why is Tchaikovsky being shown at all? Well, when he did the Nutcracker Suite for the very first time in St. Petersburg back in 1892, that was when TAFE New South Wales opened its doors to 30 students. So TAFE New South Wales is actually older than most universities in this country. It's also given birth to UTS and UNSW. So when, again, does a parent know this? Does he know that, or does she know that TAFE is older than most universities. It's actually given birth to universities. Do they know about some of the people that have actually come through TAFE, like Donna Hay? Donna Hay went to TAFE New South Wales, did commercial cookery, sold over 8 million cookbooks, had 20 million, been editor, food editor of The Age, been food editor of Sydney Morning Herald, editor of Marie Claire. She went to TAFE. Do they know that? Nikki Zimmerman?
App developer,
No,
drone.
not that one. Nikki Zimmerman. Nikki Zimmerman started making dresses in the garage of a parent's house in Paddington when she was 12. She then went on to sell them in Paddington markets. She's now got a $600 million business. She's got boutiques in London, New York, LA, Saint-Tropez, and Australia. She went to TAFE, did costume and fashion design. And did you know, I mean, if you go to the International Fashion Show, which is always held in Sydney, TAFE are the only provider that can actually have a scene within that show where they showcase the new designs that have actually come out of TAFE New South Wales. So these are things that we need to get across to parents and also to empower students that they know this, that they're going to an organisation or taking up vet qualification. It's something to be really proud of, and to actually, there is energy and diversity in all of this. And I guess when we start looking around at some of the diversity, and we'll come on to National Skills Week, but one of the reasons why National Skills Week started was to highlight the diversity in vocational education. In other words, yes, you can do viticulture. Yes, you can learn how to be an apprentice jockey. Yes, and you do all the trades as well. And yes, you can go and do things from a drama and production. And when we looked at that production for the Gold Coast, I mean, the Gold Coast now are building 2 new studios. There's a new $120 million studio being built in Cairns. There are 2 new studios being built out in WA. Why? Because Queensland have openly said, the government there, they want to become the Hollywood of Australia. And within that, you've got all these jobs. And within that, you've got the creative jobs. And sometimes we forget the creativity that emanates out of vocational education. Parents in particular don't know half of this stuff, that you can actually go and get a creative career or even do things like cybersecurity. There's a lot of information that's available to us. Claire was talking about the digital world and how that's changing. And I guess that one of the things that I want to impress upon you today is that all this information is out there, and it's very short and it's very sharp. So have a look at this. This is something that was produced by the CSIRO, okay, about digital careers.
App developer, drone pilot, YouTuber. It's crazy how many jobs there are now that didn't even exist when we were born.
And smart people say there'll be even more in the future. Today's jobs will go extinct and new ones will get invented.
What are they going to be?
Well, no one knows for sure, but it's safe to say heaps of them will be digital.
Digital.
Digital
careers.
What's that mean? Well, it doesn't just mean like writing code.
It means jobs of the future are going to need human brains plus computer brains.
Like a truck driver in the future won't drive an actual truck. They'll drive a computer that drives the truck by remote control.
Chefs in the future will have more computer-controlled machines doing stuff.
Filmmakers, musicians, artists are all going to use digital technology even more than they already do.
Doctors, police, teachers, almost all careers are going to be digital careers and show us sweet opportunities that are opening up and how to take advantage of them.
So when we talk about digital careers, you're probably wondering why we started off with Russell Crowe talking about Plato and illustrating about musicians being in Silicon Valley. Well, music is based on maths. And if you were to ask students if they like music, I can guarantee 99% of all the hands would go up. If you ask them if they like maths, you're lucky if you get about 20%. So it's trying to, if you like, connect some of these things. And when we talk about digital, I mean, for example, Vivid has only just finished. TAFE students did one of these shows within Vivid. Will parents know that? You know, so when you look at that, about how it's influencing, whether it be conferences, all these things, okay? Digital is getting involved in it. I was in LA 3 years ago. It was 2019, just before COVID hit. And my wife went into a boutique. We're in Beverly Hills. She went into this boutique, and I didn't want to go in. I sat outside having a coffee. Anyway, she came running out 20 minutes later and said, "You have to come in and see this." So I thought, oh, she wants to buy something, but yes, she did buy something, but it was why she bought it. And we went into this boutique, and it had wall-to-wall videos. And then it had one single rack in the middle of the boutique. And on there was an example of all the different things that you could buy, different dresses. But you didn't have, you know, size 6 to number 16. You had just one example. And you took the dress or whatever it was that you wanted, and you took it into the changing room. And the changing room wasn't the sort of changing room you find in David Jones with bad lighting, cracked mirror, and all that sort of stuff. This was computerized. So if it was a cocktail dress, you could get a cocktail environment, atmosphere, music. And then this is what happened when you put the dress on.
A little too busy, too purple, too short, too hot. Yeah, that's new. Okay. I think my mom wore this. This is great. Flip.
So it's about trying to, I guess, get students and indeed parents to understand these enormous changes that are coming and how they will relate to the careers of the future. And if you don't think this is happening, New York, you can't walk into stores in Fifth Avenue now without a digital interaction somewhere within that store. The other area I want to talk about is that we have, and I know we've got some of our vet alumni here today. I think Casey Fox and Stella are here, and we'll be hearing from them later on. Chris mentioned about World Schools. I was chair of World Schools for 5 or 6 years, and I got involved in that from my media days. And here I was running an education company, and we had offices in New Zealand and here and also internationally. And Bob Puffett, who was then the CEO of New South Wales TAFE, he phoned me up. And I didn't know who he was, and he said, "Hello, I'm the CEO at TAFE New South Wales." I said, "Right." And he said, "Why don't you ever cover vet in Campus Review?" And I said, "Well, I've no idea really, but I'll ask the editor or you can speak to him yourself." But I said, maybe it's uninteresting and not very dull, very dull. And he said, "Well, it's not dull and it's certainly very interesting." I said, "Right, okay." And so anyway, Bob persisted. And eventually, he persuaded me to go to Enmore because he said, "Tell me, what are your interests?" And he said, "What did you do at school?" And I said, "Well, I wanted to be a professional footballer." He said, "How did that go?" I said, "I failed." And then he said, "Well, what happened then?" I said, "I went to art college." And he said, "Well, what was that like?" And I said, "Well, I failed at that too. It was just slinging paper to the wall and listening to Jimi Hendrix, and you never really got anywhere." So he then said, "Well, what happened then?" I said, "Well, I then joined the Times as an office boy." And he said, "How did that go?" I said, "Brilliantly, thank you." And he said, "Well, you've obviously got a bit of a creative bent, so come with me to Enmore." So I went down to Enmore TAFE, and I was just literally blown away at the creativity and the passion that I found in that environment. And from then on, we covered Campus Review, and from then I got involved in World Schools. And World Schools is probably one of the best kept secrets. It is like the Skills Olympics. But one of the things that comes out of World Skills is that we get silver medalists, gold medalists, and then they go to represent Australia as the Skilleroos. And when we do things like National Skills Week or even like the Skills and Thrill shows, we get some of those vet alumni to come on and talk. And one that we got on to talk was Jessica Martin. Now, Jessica went to ride TAFE and did silver service. And she got the gold medal nationally at the national competition, and then she went to represent Australia in, I think it was London, at the international competition. London, by the way, they put 60 million euros on the table through Tony Blair to host it. And the reason they wanted to host it was to demonstrate all the skills that went into building the 2012 Olympics. So Jessica went there and she won a silver medal. And I got her on Sky News with another guy who was who'd won, he came 5th in the world in carpentry. And we got them on Sky News. And one of the things Jess said, she was asked by Janine Perrott, what do you want to be? She said, well, I want to go on, I want to open up my own business. And that was 14 years ago. And then a couple of weeks ago, I got a call from Jess, and she said, hey, I understand you're in Byron Bay. I said, yeah. She said, I've just opened up a restaurant there. We've got a wine bar as well. And I said, you're kidding? So he said, no, you've got to come down. So I went down to Johnson's Lane, and sure enough, there's Heather's, little restaurant, boutique restaurant, brand new, just opened up. I said, why did you do that? She said, oh, well, we've got a winery in Melbourne. And we thought that, yeah, we like Byron, and the opportunity came up, and so we've started this restaurant, and I've also got the wine shop across the corner. And when you start looking at some of the people that have come through, whether it be World Skills or the vet system, they've all got amazing stories, and we need to get those stories out there. You know, we do everything that we can, but all of you have got the opportunity to do it as well. And one of the other guys that I really enjoyed listening to is a guy called, I think his name was Mark Doherty. And Mark, he was a horticulturalist. And at 14, he started earning money mowing lawns. And he got a great little business out of it. So then he decided to do horticulture. And he became the school-based apprentice of the year. And we got him on 2GB, it was a phone-in chat line in the evening. And parents that were ringing in, speaking to Mark, and Mark was talking about the broader things in vet, the questions that they were asking only went on to illustrate they had no real idea what vocational education was all about and the opportunities that existed for their children. And everybody in this room has an opportunity to get those stories out. And I want to encourage you to do that, because it's the only way that we're going to change the thinking and dispel some of the myths that are associated with vocational education. When we look at skills of the future, I'm not going to go through all of these because you know them, but one of the things that is coming out is that when we do our skills and thrill shows, we get asked quite a bit about green skills. The difficulty I've got is answering the question because I'm not sure what courses. I know if you go to TAFE, there are some courses, but this is something that students certainly are demonstrating that they have a keen interest in all the environmental issues. Things like agriculture. One of the points we make in the Skills and Thrill show is I can never understand why you look at something like agriculture and the harvest trail and a gap year. We have 146,000 overseas students come here prior to COVID, and many of them go into either hospitality or they do the harvest trail to go around Australia in groups. They all have a great time and they get, interested in the harvest trail. And you see, often these things come up. And I remember hearing from a girl, she was out in Orange and it was the school holidays, and her and a mate, they were sitting down in McDonald's and they didn't know what to do. And the mate said, hey, why don't we go up the shearing shed? I've been up there before, it's a laugh. So this girl said, oh, okay, we've got nothing better to do. So they went up to the shearing shed. And had a good time there. Don't know what a good time meant, but they had a good time. And then one girl said, well, I'd quite like to know more about wall classing. So she came back and found out that she could do a traineeship on wall classing at TAFE. So she did a school-based traineeship on wall classing. She's now 26 years old. She became a professional wall classer, travelled the country, owns her own ute, owns her own house, and is now studying to be a wall auctioneer. Happened purely by accident. But I mean, you know, people don't sit down with children and talk about wall classing. But that's what I mean. It's about trying to, it's a discovery that we're on as well. Healthcare. And what I'm trying to do here is give you a relationship between, you know, why would somebody go into healthcare? You know, it's really dealing with old people. Well, there was a girl from Barker College who I met. And Barker, they were trying to do the right thing. They brought somebody in who was a paraplegic in a wheelchair to get them to explain to the students, the year 11s and year 12s, how they wanted to be treated by society. They didn't want, you know, sympathy. They wanted, you know, positivity. And after this guy had done the address, this girl who was actually wanting to be a lawyer, she said, I want to find a way to help people like that. So she went into aged care, as opposed to what she was going to do as a lawyer. But it just kind of touched an area that she felt that she could connect with. So what can you do? Well, Chris very kindly mentioned National Skills Week. So let me tell you a little bit more about National Skills Week. This started because I went to see Julia Gillard when she was Education Minister and said, look, we need to have a week that focuses on vocational education and provide a platform where nationally, whether you be an employer, whether you be a school, whether you be an RTO, whether you be a TAFE, whether you be the government, that you can leverage the opportunities. She said yes. So we launched it in Canberra at the Press Club. It went out live on ABC, went out live on Sky Business, and there are three main elements to it. One was to highlight the diversity of vocation. Two was to highlight the the industry trends. And the third one was to really dispel many of the myths that surround VET. That's what it's about. And it has grown in stature ever since. So this year I can tell you what's happening in New South Wales, and I can tell you what's happening nationally. Nationally, Brendan O'Connor is launching it in Parliament House in Canberra on August the 10th. He wanted to do it in a sitting week, and we're doing that jointly with the Australian Chamber of Commerce. And that will be a breakfast. In New South Wales, we're again working with TAFE, and we're working with the Chamber of Commerce, and that will be held at Parliament House. And I can't remember the date. I think it's the Wednesday of National Skills Week, and that will be a function, and many of you might be invited. I will get the list. So that was where the new... But more importantly, it's about what you can do within schools or get other people to do within the environment. And I'm just going to briefly talk about some of the things that schools have done. And if you go into the National Skills Week website, there's a whole list, 3, 4, 5, 6 pages of what schools have done as ideas during National Skills Week. I mean, one school did a father-daughter dinner, and they had 2 girl tradies. One was a plumber, and the other was, I think, in the building and construction, talking about their journey and how they were getting on and what they were doing and how much they were earning. And that was a father-daughter dinner arranged by the school. Another school has organised representatives from TAFE or an industry to come in. I was talking, last week we had somebody from Komatsu. Now Komatsu is a big, earth movers, and they do all that sort of mining stuff. He came in to talk to some of the students that we had at Wollongong University on our Skills and Thrills show. And he said he's got a 21-year-old who's earning $220,000 a year, $220,000 a year, doing 2 weeks in Canada, No, 4 weeks in Canada and then 4 weeks back home. 4 weeks back home, does nothing. 4 weeks in Canada, she's working on a Komatsu site. And she'd come through the apprenticeship. And he said, that's not unusual. We've got this, we've got that. And the kids are going, wow, that's amazing. So please go into the National Skills Week site, see what schools have done in the past, because these are real activities that they undertook, and see how and what you might be able to encourage, whether it be a school or an industry or an RTO, to do. Now I'm going to end with, I'm 2 minutes over, Claire. I'm going to end with 3 minutes that we finish up with on the Skills and Thrills show, because we want to leave them on a high with a couple of very important messages.
Hello, I'm Mr. Ed. A horse is a horse, of course, and no one can talk to a horse, of course. That is, of course, unless the horse is the famous Mr. Ed. Go right to the source and ask the horse. He'll give you the answer that you endorse. He's always on a steady course. Talk to Mr. Ed.
Okay, and I'll conclude with, when we did a show at Southern Cross University about 5 weeks ago, we did it in the theatre there, and we had schools from around Lismore who've had a fairly tough time, as you know, with the floods, but we also had 20 students who came from Nimbin. And the teacher came up to me afterwards and said, that was fantastic. She said, these kids that came along today, none of them believe they have a future. And she said, what they've just seen will give them hope. Thank you.